gentlemen, we want to thank everybody for being here today. We really want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy Thursday to be here in the building with us, the building that Patsy and Bill built. This is their retirement home, as many of you know, which is the total opposite of most of us think about our retirement home, right? We're going to downsize, but they did not. They made enough space for their collection. On behalf of Patsy and the family, we want to thank everybody for joining us today. We wanted to give everybody else an opportunity to maybe share a little something about Bill, some kind of memory that you have or some kind of inspiration that might come to mind. And a lot of people have said that they're very shy to stand in front of a microphone, but you know what? Probably 90% of the people in this room don't really give the kind of speeches that Bill Porter would give. So we'll take any kind of little antidote you have, anything. Please don't be embarrassed to step forward and say a few words. And maybe we'll get my brother Adam to read some of the messages that came in through the mail, too, to talk about. Does anybody want to step forward and say a few things? Not yet. Nobody wants to be the first. Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. Please introduce yourself and how you met Bill. Thank you.
My name is Ben Salvador, and I'm a retiree from General Motors. And for 4.5 years, around the mid-90s on, I was Bill's assistant in Buick 1. When I first joined the studio, the executive who told me I was going to be working for Bill, his advice to me was, Bill has a lot to teach. Just watch and listen. So I did that, and I had known Bill over the years, and his reputation for his talent, his skill, his knowledge was well known throughout the building. Over those 4.5 years, beyond what I learned from him from a design standpoint, was we both loved all fields of art. It was not just cars. We liked fine art, we liked architecture, we even had discussions about music. Sometimes he'd say, let's just step in the office, and we'd be in there for, I don't know, an hour at a time, and we'd talk about almost anything. I remember one conversation about how he was talking about how beauty and art is universal. What's considered good art in one country or one region of the world is appreciated by other countries, other regions of the world. So I thought I'd challenge him. I said, explain to me Chinese classical music then. Because I spent a few years as a child in Taiwan, and Chinese classical music sounded to me like they were still tuning their instruments. And so we had discussions like that where we had fun sharing our opinions, sometimes challenging each other's opinions, and he will always be one of the favorite memories, favorite factors of my years of employment at General Motors.
I'm David McIntosh. I had about 35 years at General Motors, and I worked for Bill twice. When I first started in '64, when I graduated from Art Center, Bill was running design development. So that was my first thing with him. And in his office, the sketch there of the black sedan was really inspiring to me because it wasn't like wacky or crazy. It was very beautifully drawn, really perfect in a lot of ways, and brand new looking. And I thought, what an interesting take when I had been doing things that were too long, too low, wheels too big, things like that. You know, we always still kind of do that. But anyhow, Bill was very inspiring to me right off the bat. He actually had that dragster downstairs that was hanging vertically on the wall in his office. So I remember that very well. So years later, I had left GM and came back. The first studio they assigned to me was Advanced One with Bill Porter as my chief. So I got to work with him twice, and truthfully, the years that I had with Bill in Advanced 1, with Roger Hewitt as the assistant and Ely Russinoff, and once in a while some new kid would come in and leave and back and forth, but the four of us were kind of there pretty steady. And Ben reminded me we used to talk for probably at least an hour every morning about all kinds of stuff, and then we'd think, oh wait, we got to get to work. So that was really fun. But I always considered those 8 years with Bill, it was my master class in auto design. I learned so much from him. And the reason for it, I think, is because if he saw a sketch that he liked or thought had some promise or was interesting, you would make a scale model of it immediately. We'd go right to 3D. And I learned so much from that. My favorite story about Bill was when we were working on the 78 Grand Prix downsized car, and they wanted, Mitchell was in his nostalgia phase toward the end of his career, and he wanted this classic elegance, and so we went to the library, Russ and I went to the library, and we discovered this Bugatti coupe from about 34, I think it's a Type 50, I'm not positive. Anyhow, that car had this roofline with a fast windshield and then a real tight, abrupt upper on the back seat. And Russ said, oh, I want to try this. So he tried it and was doing this kind of wedgy modern car with this upper on it. And we got management reviews on it, and they were kind of like, well, I don't know if that's quite what we're looking for. So I did a sketch, and Bill Porter comes over, and after a review, and he said, I don't know. I said, well, let me show you this and just see if this is anything you think might work. And he says, that's it! And I was like, you know, you don't get that every day in working at a big company with a lot of talented people all around you. You just don't hear that too often. So that's my favorite moment with him. He actually signed one of my sketches because he just really appreciated it that much. And I just was really pleased and proud to also be a friend of his afterwards, and that our studio was so tight and worked so well together. It was a really wonderful experience working with Bill. I think that's all I can remember right off the bat here, and thank you so much.
My name is Wayne Cady, and I worked with Bill a couple of times throughout my career. And the first time was in not design development, but preliminary design under a guy named Bernie Smith. Bernie was the chief designer, and Bill was the assistant chief. And I'm going to tell a funny story about what happened in there. You know, Bill was a very talented guy, and he was very helpful. He was a real gentleman. You know, I don't know of anybody that ever said anything bad about Bill Porter. But there was an incident that happened in preliminary design. I think, were you in there, Dick, when? Okay, anyway, there was a guy that had done a nice rendering, and back then it was like an honor if you can get in the entranceway so that the boss, when he walks in, he'd see it. And it was like, maybe it gets you some brownie points or whatever. But the guy, I probably shouldn't mention names, but anyway, he put it on the wall in the entrance, and a couple days later, we come into the studio, and his piece was brought down, and it was sitting on the floor, and then there was another one that was almost identical to his with a minor modification, and it was up on the wall. And the guy that did the original one was really upset and wondered, what's this all about? So we decided that maybe he should do another piece, and like the one that this guy had replaced his original with, and then crinkle it up and put it on the floor. So when he comes in the next morning, he sees his work on the floor and then the original piece back up on the wall. He'd get upset. Well, he did, and he was supposed to go to, when he saw that, he was going to go tell Mitchell, and while he was gone, they took his piece and put it back up. I've mentioned that to Bill, and I don't think he remembered that, but I thought it was pretty wild. And I'd only been there maybe less than a year. But anyway, there are things that went on like that kind of broke the ice, and it was a great place to work. And the reason it was a great place to work is because of people like Bill Porter. I had a lot of respect for Bill, and he'll surely be missed in the design world.
Hello, everyone. I'm so proud of all of you to be here to honor this amazing man and our beloved Patsy. So here's my crazy story. I live on the corner. It's an old farmhouse. It was built in the 1850s, and it was literally tumbled down on the back part. So Zach and Bill are wandering down the road. This was several years ago, and I was out walking my dog, and I was like, Bill, I just don't know what to do. I cannot find a contractor. And Zach's like going, I don't know what to do. And then Bill goes, I can take care of that, because he's a very confident man. He goes, I am not kidding. I went to a horse feed store that's in South Line. A couple days later, I found a contractor after looking for 2 years. So, thank you, Bill. And just a really cool thing. Maybe we need to clap every once in a while when we need something. Do you remember that, Zach?
Unfortunately, I never had a chance to work with Bill, but I did work next door to him. I was in Advance Oldsmobile, and Bill was next door in Advance Pontiac. So one day we were talking, and John Manugan reminded me of this, and I had started going to a restaurant in Fraser called El Charro, because I read about it in the Sunday paper when Detroit Free Press had that little picture section on the weekend. It was a new restaurant, Mexican food. It was very rare at the time. And anyway, Bill, it turned out, was a real foodie, and we would call in advance and then arrive. There'd be people sitting there waiting for their food. We'd sit down, and the food would come out of the kitchen, and people would really give us terrible looks. I never had a chance to work with Bill, but I always really admired him, because whenever you talked to him, he talked about design at a different level, and probably a different level than most people in the building. And I think Bill was one of the few people in the building that was really interested in design history. And we used to throw things away until they discovered that's not a good thing to do about 10 years ago, I guess. But sad to see Bill go. Knowing him was wonderful. I would always think of Bill as probably the only intellectual in the design building, because he thought of things in a different way, and that was one of the charms. And of course, as a teacher, he's absolutely without peer. And I was there at the Scarab Club when Bill signed the beam, the only car designer to ever invited to do that. And I know he thought of that as a great honor, and it is. So anyway, I appreciate the invitation. Pat, thank you very much.
My husband has pressed me into this. I wasn't going to speak because all of you had a much different, intimate relationship with Bill than I did. But my father worked for Chrysler as an executive at Chrysler. And in executives' homes, when you went to parties, there were wonderful drawings of cars. And we would ask about them, and they would all go, well, there's artists around, and we don't talk about it. So that, of course, intrigued me as a kid. So I knew there were drawings out there. But every time I talked about trying to do a show, an exhibition I was curating, they said, oh no, there's none of those drawings. So I found out that I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I grew up in Detroit, went to Louisville. Bill grew up in Louisville and came to Detroit. We crossed paths but never met when we were young. And But I thought, well, maybe that's the key to unlock the door. So I tried reaching him and couldn't, and I finally called his publisher and said, if I write a letter, would you forward it to Bill Porter? And he said yes. And I wrote him a lot. And he kept saying, there aren't any of those drawings. They were all destroyed. Finally, Patsy and Bill were coming down to Louisville to see family, and he said that he would meet with me. And my boss and I and my husband took him to a really funky little restaurant for breakfast in Louisville. And we talked for 3 hours. And I finally convinced him that I wanted to do the show for the right reasons, because I wanted to talk about the creative process. And I wanted to talk about these men as artists. And he finally said yes, and it was a thrill. And there was one obstacle, and that was that everybody was afraid to release the pieces they had because there might be repercussions. And he went to the archivist at GM and said, don't you think it's time to open the door? And he said yes. And we figured if GM broke it, then Chrysler and Ford would too. And the most amazing thing happened only because Bill was involved and everybody trusted him. The work came out of hiding, and there were so many wonderful pieces. And Bill would load up his van and come down, and we would sort all these drawings. And I'm really proud of the show we ended up with, and I hope all the artists were too, because it was a labor of love, and it was an incredible experience working with Bill. And I feel foolish being up here when all of you work so close with him, but it was very important in my career and also just in my life, being a good Motown girl. So I thank you for letting me speak, and I want to thank all those artists that were in the show for allowing me, trusting me to hang that work, and it was most appreciated. Thank you.
I'm Adam Porter. I'm going to read, there's several people who couldn't have made it, but left some thoughts, and I'll read one from Bruce Johnson. And I'm not a public reader like a newscaster is, but I'll do my best. So I met Bill and Patsy in 1988 at the first National Arts and Crafts Conference held at Grove Park Inn overlooking Asheville, North Carolina. The reputation had preceded them as their keen eye and appreciation for the fine design elements of the works of Gustav Stickley, Charles Rolfs, Dirk van Erp, and other masters of the arts and crafts movement had distinguished the pair. Even in those early days of the rediscovery of the arts and crafts movement, collectors and dealers often resorted to unscrupulous tactics. That was never the case for Bill and Patsy. Always quiet, unassuming, and modest, they were always engrossed in learning and discovering more about the history of the arts and crafts movement. As much as they learned, they shared with anybody who would ask, from museum curators to beginning collectors, like myself. They not only attended each of our annual February conferences, they were also fixtures at every seminar, immersing themselves in the flow of information from the podium and the exciting news amongst their friends over the latest shared discovery. One of our early arts and crafts conferences, Bill and Patsy came to me with an idea, suggesting that we supplement our large ballroom seminars with smaller, more intimate discussion groups in the adjacent meeting rooms. Those small discussion groups became one of the most valuable aspects of every arts and crafts conference which followed, as it gave collectors the opportunity to informally share information, opinions, and discoveries with one another. More importantly, they fostered friendships which lasted long after our Sunday night departures. I welcomed each opportunity I had to talk with Bill, to glean his opinion of whatever puzzle I was hoping to resolve. When I asked, he was always ready to take his turn at the podium, sharing his research and insights into the design elements of the arts and crafts pioneers. Whenever he did, the spacious ballroom at the Grove Park Inn was always packed, with every chair taken, as the collectors, young and old, relished the opportunity to absorb Bill's insight and experience. Like all of you, I learned a great deal from Bill, not just about design, proportions, and details, but about the value of debate and discussion, and most importantly, of friendship. That, above all else, will always remain Bill Porter's lasting legacy. That was Bruce Johnson.
God, doesn't Adam look like Bill? I got to know Bill pretty well when we started going out to dinner every Tuesday night. I was teaching a night class at CCS, and Bill would come down and teach us history of design class. And Bill, of course, would come from GEM, and he was on a car test drive program at GM where he was driving new vehicles all the time and evaluating them. And he showed up one day in a Cadillac, a brand new Cadillac, and I think it was new model change, a huge black Cadillac, right off the assembly line. It had to be in September. It was so new, I don't think there was any on the street. And Bill and I had decided we would go to a new Mexican restaurant in Mexican Town. And so we got there. It was before 6 o'clock because we had to get back, eat and get back. And when we got out of the car, I happened to notice that there was no parking until 6 o'clock. And I said something to Bill. And Bill says, oh, okay, well, I'll move the car. And about this time, the proprietor of the restaurant said, oh, no, wait a minute. I said, I'll have Juan here, who's one of his employees. He said, I'll have Juan watch your car for you. And the meter maid, we know her, and he won't give you a ticket. She won't give you a ticket. And if he has any problem, he will come get you. And I was, okay. So we went into this Mexican restaurant. We were served like we were in one of the fanciest restaurants in Detroit. We had a waiter standing by our table, and there were a few other people there, but nobody else was getting waited on like we were. And it happened that day, Bill had a meeting with Division in Buick, and he was dressed in a black suit, probably his finest suit. He was dressed to the T. And I had my typical teaching clothes on, blue jeans and a flannel shirt. And so we had this meal, and it would take a sip of water, and the water glass would be filled again. And we both thought, and this is a little strange. And sure enough, Juan's still out there watching the car. Won't let anybody touch it. And we got through with our meal, and then the proprietor came out. I think he had sopapillas for us, and he said, have some sopapillas on us for dessert. And golly, okay. And so we ate, got back in the car and got on. And so on the way home, we're talking about how strange this dinner was and the proprietor was. And finally, I told him, I said, Bill, I really think that the proprietor thought you were Don Corleone's brother. And the big ugly guy is your bodyguard.
I love history like Bill did, but I like to go to photo shows, collect photographs, old photographs. So one day I'm at this photo show in Royal Oak, and here's a couple of photographs, and they're old cars, but they're not regular old cars. They look like clay models of a 1912 Overland. And I turned on the back, and it said wood model, but the way it appeared in the photograph, it looked like a clay model. So I had to have these photographs of a 1912 styling model from Willys Overland. And I'm thinking now, somebody did this. There's some personalities involved behind, what's the story behind these photos? And so I thought of Bill, and I went to Bill with these photos, and his jaw dropped open. Where'd you get those? And he says, I was on a sabbatical in Toledo for 6 months looking for those photographs. And he had all the names of the guys that I'm wondering, how am I ever going to find out the names of these guys? But here he had written the story that I had the photos that went with it. So we made copies for Bill of the photos, and everybody was happy.
Bill Porter, along with a few other people from Birmingham, saved the south end of Birmingham around the city of Birmingham. As you know, the Porters lived on Pierce Street, which is about 2 blocks down from the actual center part of Birmingham. But in the 1970s, the south end of the town, around Frank Street, Pierce Street, George Street, et cetera, very close to Lincoln, was being overrun by, drugs being pushed in some of these old homes. And there was, I guess, even a murder I had heard. And the zoning was all mixed. So people were taking advantage of that and buying up these old homes that were dilapidated. And then there were a few other people that were turning some of these old homes into beautiful homes, such as the Porters. And they were very worried that people who had invested and made their homes lovely, from these homes dated like 1905, 1912, et cetera. But the other ones were just becoming more and more shabby. And one of the things that was behind this, I'm sorry to tell this to car people, was that there were like these car lots that were south of Birmingham, lining Woodward, just south of Birmingham. And they were hoping at some point that they would be able to buy up this cheap land and tear down the houses and actually put car dealerships in the south end of Birmingham where we lived. So that was also another affair. Finally, what really was the straw that broke this camel's back was that someone had the nerve to put a ladder down the front of, like a stairway in the front of one of these old homes from 1912, because they had people living upstairs and they figured they needed an escape route. Well, that kind of horrified folks. So Bill Porter and a few other people came together and decided they'd start the neighborhood association of our area, the central part of Birmingham. And lo and behold, within a couple years, and a lot of petition signing, I'm sure, they turned this whole thing around. And the underlying zoning was no longer this hodgepodge of duplexes and multi-zoning. It now became single-family homes. So if you owned this apartment house in the Seabury area, if you owned this older home that was a duplex, if it burned to the ground, it would become a single family. So that is how Bill Porter saved the south end of Birmingham.
Hi, folks. This is from Eric Clough. Make sure this is one page. Yes, we're good. I was still a wet behind the ears young designer when I was assigned to Bill's Buick 1 studio in 1987. After 2 years in an advanced studio, Buick was my first production experience, and I was nervous. Bill's reputation as an automotive design and art historian was legendary, and deservedly so. Every CCS graduate said his design history class was the best and the most challenging course they took there. I had no such course at my school. Would every conversation with him reveal more of my ignorance? I made a note to take his course sometime to catch up. To my great relief, Bill was very welcoming, warm, and funny. I liked him immediately. He was always willing to share his vast knowledge with me, and without being condescending in the least. Gracefully, he backfilled some of the knowledge I clearly lacked. Bill was also known to be a very philosophical designer, with rationale and principle behind every decision. Much more an industrial designer than a car stylist. He described surfaces in precise geometric terms, talked about lofting of body sections and entasis and the signature of the Buick vertical grille bars, and why super ellipses were preferred to pure ellipses for Buick. I didn't know it at the time, but being my first production studio, but this was not the typical way to design at GM. Bill was one of the few at GM who worked this way, and it was a great fit for me. After about 3 years in the studio, I was no longer nervous. 3 years. I still had a lot to learn. Now, many of you may be shocked by this, but Bill was a perfectionist. His eye for line quality and surface development was extraordinary, and he would find any imperfection. He always had the last go on every line of car that was released from the studio, often to the frustration of his designers. In 1990, we were putting the final touches on the 95 Riviera, which was a revolutionary in many ways and set a new course for Buick's design language. Maybe it was because my sketch that it was based on, or maybe because he wanted to test me, Bill asked me to tape the final body side upper peak line on the model for sculptors to work on. So this is on the wall. I got to roll a roll of 1-inch tape, and with sweating palms spent an hour carefully crafting the signature undulating line that ran from the inside of the headlight, rising over the front wheel, dropping under the side glass, and then rising again over the rear wheel before dropping again to the rear end. It had to look good in every view. No, it had to be perfect in every view. Luckily, Bill was not watching me. When I was done, Bill came over to inspect. He walked around and around, sighting it from the front and the rear, one eye closed, getting close, walking it back away. After about 10 minutes, he said, "You know, Eric, that's really pretty good, but I think it needs a bit of a tweak." And he took that roll of 1-inch tape and laid a line next to mine to correct it. I stood back and watched, disappointed that I still didn't pass muster. When he was done, his line started where mine did, ever so gently pulled away over the front wheel, then blended back to mine at the back of the door. The most it deviated from mine, less than 1 millimeter. I measured it. When Bill Porter only tweaks your line by under 1 millimeter, that means you've passed the test. My disappointment changed to elation. Life got busy with overtime and family, and sadly, I never did take his design history course. I sure wish I did. Bill was one of a kind, a great designer and a teacher who had tremendous influence on my design career. I'm truly grateful to have known him. That's Eric Clough.
Really, as a family, we really thank you all for taking the time to be here and share your thoughts about Bill and to be in this home that he and Patsy created as their retirement home. It's just so wonderful to have a collection of different people from all different backgrounds that remember a lot of special things about him and his friendship to all of you. It's just wonderful to have you here. So thank you.